The day I found the HOA violation notice stapled to my front door was the same day I realized my property backed up to what they had turned into their own personal dumping ground. I'm Marcus Lawson, and I've lived in the Timber Ridge development outside of Missoula, Montana, for 3 years. I bought my 5-acre lot specifically because it bordered national forest land, or so I thought. The property gave me direct access to some of the best hunting and fishing in the state, and my small cabin sat perfectly nestled among towering pines. I'm what you'd call an outdoorsman through and through. I guide hunting trips in the fall, run a small wildlife photography business in the summer, and generally keep to myself. The HOA had been a minor annoyance when I first moved in, but nothing I couldn't handle with a polite smile and timely dues payments. That changed on a freezing February morning when I stepped outside to find that bright yellow notice flapping in the wind. Violation notice. Unauthorized debris and storm damage on property boundary. Owner responsible for immediate cleanup. Estimated cost, $4,500. Payment due within 30 days or lien will be placed on property. I stood there in my thermal underwear and boots, coffee mug steaming in the 17-degree air, reading the notice 3 times. Storm damage. I'd been out of town for a week on a winter survival course I was teaching up in Glacier National Park. I'd left my property immaculate as always. My workshop was organized, my firewood stacked, my small equipment shed locked tight. I walked around back, following the tree line that marked my property boundary. What I found made my blood boil despite the cold. Someone had dumped an enormous pile of brush, broken tree limbs, and what looked like the remains of several large pines right along the back edge of my property. The debris field stretched maybe 40 feet wide and was piled 8 feet high in places. It was clearly fresh, the bright yellow of newly exposed wood still visible on the broken branches, and the whole mess had been pushed right up against the survey markers that delineated my land. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The angle of the debris told a story. Everything was pushed from the direction of the HOA's common area, a 10-acre parcel that sat between the development and the actual Forest Service land. I'd always thought it was weird that the HOA controlled that land, but apparently it was part of the original development plan. I climbed over my fence and walked into the common area. The evidence was impossible to miss. Fresh equipment tracks, probably from a small bulldozer or large skid steer, led from a newly cleared section of the common area straight to where they dumped everything on what they thought was the property line. Except they'd miscalculated by about 15 feet. The debris wasn't on HOA land. It was on mine. The fresh clearing in the common area looked intentional. They'd removed dozens of trees, likely damaged in the ice storm we'd had 3 weeks prior, and rather than pay to have the debris properly removed, they just pushed it onto what they assumed was Forest Service land. But they'd screwed up their measurements. I spent the next hour documenting everything with photos and video, making sure to capture the equipment tracks, the survey markers, and the clear line showing the debris was entirely on my property. By the time I got back to my cabin, I had 17 missed calls, all from the same number. I didn't recognize it, but I called it back anyway. Timber Ridge HOA, this is Barbara speaking. The voice was crisp, efficient, and already annoyed. This is Marcus Lawson. I have about 17 missed calls from this number. Oh, Mr. Lawson. Yes, this is Barbara Chen, HOA president. Did you receive your violation notice? I did. That's actually why I'm calling. That debris isn't mine. Mr. Lawson, our records clearly show that storm damage occurred along your property line. As the property owner, you're responsible for maintaining your boundaries in accordance with our CC and RTKS. Barbara, I've been gone for a week, and that debris was pushed onto my property from the common area. I have photos of the equipment tracks. There was a pause. That's impossible. The HOA conducted authorized maintenance on the common area. Any debris would have been contained to HOA property. Well, it wasn't. It's 15 feet onto my land. I have the survey markers in my photos. Mr. Lawson, I'm looking at our survey right now. The debris is on the property line, which makes it your responsibility under Section 12.3 of the covenants. I took a deep breath. Barbara, I'm going to email you photos right now. You'll see the survey markers clearly showing this is on my property, and you'll see the tracks showing where your equipment came from. Our contractor assured us everything was handled appropriately. The violation stands. You have 30 days. I'm not paying for your cleanup. Then we'll proceed with placing a lien on your property. Have a good day, Mr. Lawson. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, and started going through the HOA documents I'd signed when I bought the property. The CC and RTKS were 73 pages of dense legal language, but I'd always been thorough. I found Section 12.3. It said property owners were responsible for storm damage on their property. It said nothing about damage caused by HOA contractors or debris dumped from HOA land. I emailed Barbara the photos with a detailed explanation. I included close-ups of the survey markers, wide shots showing the debris field, and images of the equipment tracks leading from the common area. I kept the tone professional but firm. Her response came back in under an hour. Mr. Lawson, after reviewing your photos, the HOA board has determined that the debris naturally accumulated along the property line during recent storm events. Your responsibility remains unchanged. Please remit payment of $4,500 within 30 days or face additional penalties and a property lien. The board will be discussing your recent hostile communication at our next meeting. Hostile communication. I'd been nothing but factual. I needed to understand what had really happened. The next morning, I drove into town and stopped at the county assessor's office. I pulled up the survey records for my property and the HOA common area. The boundary was exactly where I thought it was. The debris was definitely on my land. Then I requested the recent permits. That's when things got interesting. The HOA had pulled a permit for storm damage cleanup and hazardous tree removal on the common area 2 weeks prior. The permit listed a contractor I'd never heard of, Summit Land Services. The permit had been approved for work on the common area only, with specific notes that all debris must be removed from the site or chipped on location. There was nothing authorizing them to push debris onto adjacent properties. I made copies of everything and headed to Summit Land Services. They operated out of a small yard on the edge of Missoula, surrounded by a chain-link fence and filled with heavy equipment. A guy in his 50s met me at the gate. His jacket said, "Summit Land Services" with Ray embroidered underneath. "Help you?" he asked. "I'm Marcus Lawson. You did some work for Timber Ridge HOA a couple weeks back." His expression shifted slightly. "Yeah, we did some clearing. Did you push the debris onto the adjacent property?" Ray looked uncomfortable. "Look, man, I just do what I'm told." The HOA president, that Barbara lady, she specifically told us to push everything to the back edge. Said it was all HOA land back there and we could pile it at the property line. Said they'd deal with it later or let nature take it back. Did she show you a survey? Nope. She just walked the site with us and pointed. We pushed it where she said. And the permit said you had to remove all debris or chip it on site. Ray's jaw tightened. Yeah, I know what the permit said, but she said she'd get it amended, said it would save the HOA money if we just piled it. She was real insistent. You know you pushed it onto my private property, right? Not Forest Service land. Aw, hell. Ray rubbed his face. She swore it was HOA land all the way back to the forest boundary. It's not. And now they're trying to charge me $4,500 to clean it up. Ray shook his head. That's not right. Look, I've got the work order in my files. I'll make you a copy. She signed off on everything. We even asked about the permit conditions, and she said she'd handle it with the county. He disappeared into his office and came back 5 minutes later with copies of the work order, Barbara's signature clear at the bottom, with a handwritten note. Push all debris to rear property line. We'll handle debris removal separately. I thanked Ray and headed home. I now had documentation showing that Barbara had specifically ordered the contractor to dump the debris, had misrepresented the property boundaries, and had violated the permit conditions. That evening, I sent another email to Barbara, this time CCing the entire HOA board. I attached Ray's work order and the permit documents. I explained clearly that the HOA had dumped debris on my property through their contractor, had violated their permit, and that I would not be paying for cleanup of their mess. The response came from a different email address. Janice Morrison, HOA Vice President. Mr. Lawson, the board has reviewed your claims. While we appreciate your thorough documentation, the board maintains that property owners are responsible for maintaining their boundaries. The HOA conducted legally permitted work on common areas. Any incidental debris migration due to natural weather events following our work is not the HOA's responsibility. Your payment is still due. Please note that continued hostile correspondence may result in additional violations for harassment of board members. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They were doubling down, and now threatening me with harassment charges for providing evidence. I called a property attorney in Missoula the next morning. Her name was Sarah Whitaker, and she'd handled a friend's boundary dispute a few years back. Marcus, this is pretty straightforward, she said after I explained the situation and sent her all my documentation. They dumped on your property, you have proof, and they violated their permit. They're liable, not you. So what do I do? Write them one final demand letter. Tell them they have 15 days to remove the debris at their expense, or you'll hire a contractor to remove it and bill them for the work. If they don't pay the bill, you can file a lien against the HOA's common property. I'll draft it for you. They're threatening to lien my property if I don't pay them. They can try, but it won't hold up. You have documentation that the debris is theirs. If they do place a lien, we'll fight it, and honestly, you'd have a strong case for a lawsuit at that point. Probably win attorney's fees too. Sarah sent me the demand letter that afternoon. It was professional, detailed, and firm. I sent it certified mail to Barbara and to the HOA's registered agent. A week later, I got the return receipt showing Barbara had signed for it. 2 days after that, I received a response, not from Barbara, from an attorney representing the HOA. The letter was 3 pages of legal posturing, essentially saying the HOA rejected my claims, maintained that I was responsible for the debris, and that if I didn't pay within the remaining time period, they'd proceed with the lien and also assess me additional fines for ongoing property maintenance violations and harassment of board members. I forwarded it to Sarah. They're bluffing, she said when she called me back. This attorney, I know him. He does cheap work for HOAs. He probably hasn't even looked at your evidence. They're counting on you backing down. I'm not backing down. Good. Then here's what we do. You hire a contractor, get the debris removed, and bill the HOA. We'll file the invoice as a demand for payment. If they don't pay within 30 days, we file a lien on the common area and potentially a lawsuit. How much is this going to cost me upfront? Get some quotes. But Marcus, here's another option. Do you have access to any equipment? I thought about it. I had a friend, Mike, who ran a small excavation business. He owed me a favor after I'd helped him out with a hunting lease last year. Maybe. Why? Because if you can document the cleanup costs yourself and do the work, you can bill them for your time and equipment at fair market rates. It actually might be better because then you control the timeline and the documentation. I liked that idea. I called Mike that evening. I need to borrow your excavator for a day or two. What are you getting into? He asked, but I could hear the amusement in his voice. I explained the whole situation. Mike started laughing. Are you serious? The HOA dumped on your land and is trying to charge you for it. Dead serious. Man, I've got a Kubota U55 you can use. I'll even deliver it. When do you need it? Next week. You got it. And Marcus, document everything. I want to hear how this turns out. The excavator arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered on Mike's trailer. It was a beautiful machine, compact but powerful, perfect for the job. Mike spent an hour showing me the controls, even though I'd operated similar equipment before. Remember, he said as he left, take your time, be safe, and get video of everything. I spent the rest of Tuesday mapping out the debris removal. I'd need to separate the material, chip what I could, and haul the rest. I called a local yard waste facility and arranged for dump fees. I documented every step, every expense. But that night, something happened that changed everything. I woke up at 2 in the morning to the sound of engines. Heavy engines. I grabbed my coat and boots and ran outside. 2 pickup trucks were parked on the road near my property, and I could see flashlight beams moving around near the debris pile. I pulled out my phone and started recording as I approached. Hey, I shouted. What are you doing? The flashlights turned toward me. I recognized one of the people immediately, Barbara Chen. With her was a man I didn't know and another woman I'd seen at HOA meetings. Mr. Lawson, Barbara said, and even in the darkness I could hear the disdain in her voice. We're conducting a property inspection. At 2 in the morning, on my property. This is disputed boundary area. The HOA has a right to inspect common areas. This isn't common area. This is my property. You're trespassing. The man with Barbara stepped forward. He was big, probably 6'3", wearing a Carhartt jacket. Mr. Lawson, I'm Tom Peters, HOA treasurer. We have reason to believe you've been encroaching on HOA common areas. We're documenting the boundary for legal purposes. I kept my phone recording. The boundary is marked by survey stakes. You're standing on my property. I'm asking you to leave. We'll leave when we're done with our inspection, Barbara said. I called 911. The operator answered and I explained the situation calmly. I have 3 people trespassing on my property at 2 in the morning. They're refusing to leave. Barbara's eyes went wide. You called the police. You're trespassing. Leave now or wait for the sheriff's deputy to escort you off. They conferred briefly, then Tom said, Fine. We're leaving, but this isn't over. I followed them with my phone camera as they walked back to their trucks, recording their license plates. They drove off and I stayed outside waiting. The sheriff's deputy arrived 20 minutes later. His name was Deputy Collins, and he'd actually been on a ride along with me the previous year when I'd helped search for a lost hiker. Marcus, what's going on? I explained the whole situation, showed him the video I'd just taken, and walked him through the timeline from the beginning. I showed him all my documentation on my laptop. So they dumped on your property, are trying to charge you for cleanup, and now they're trespassing at 2 in the morning. He shook his head. That's bold. Can I press charges? You can. I'll file a report. But Marcus, between you and me, this sounds like a civil matter that's escalating. Document everything, but be careful. HOA disputes can get ugly. I filed the trespassing report. Deputy Collins took statements and photos, and I sent him copies of my video. After he left, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Barbara and Tom sneaking around my property in the middle of the night. What were they really doing? Inspecting? Or something else? The next morning, I checked the debris pile carefully. Someone had spray painted orange marks on several of the logs and branches. I took photos, documenting the fresh paint. They'd marked specific pieces, though I couldn't figure out why. I called Sarah and told her about the trespassing incident. Marcus, I think we need to escalate this. I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and to Barbara personally. This is harassment at this point. Do it. But before Sarah could send the letter, I received a certified letter from the HOA. I signed for it with a sense of dread. Inside was a notice of a special assessment against my property for $12,000. The itemized list included emergency storm cleanup, $4,500 legal fees related to property dispute, $3,500 survey and boundary verification, $2,000 common area restoration due to owner encroachment, $2,000. The letter stated that I had 15 days to pay or they'd place a lien and begin foreclosure proceedings. I photographed the letter and sent it to Sarah immediately. She called me back within an hour and she was angry. This is extortion. They're making up charges to force you to comply. We need to go on offense. I'm filing an emergency motion to prevent them from placing any lien, and I'm preparing a lawsuit for harassment, trespassing, and illegal dumping. This has gone way beyond a simple property dispute. How much is this going to cost me? I'll work on contingency. When we win, they'll pay your attorney fees. But Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Don't engage with them directly anymore. All communication goes through me. And whatever you do, don't let them provoke you into doing something rash. I agreed, but I was seething. The audacity of charging me $12,000 for a mess they'd created was beyond comprehension. The next day, I started the cleanup. I'd already decided I was removing the debris myself, documenting every hour, every expense, and billing the HOA at fair market rates. If they wanted to play hardball, I could play too. I fired up the excavator and began carefully separating the debris. I worked methodically, keeping detailed logs of my hours. Mike had told me the going rate for excavator work in the area was $150 per hour, including the machine. I was being conservative and billing at $125 per hour. I worked for 3 days straight, taking breaks only for meals and sleep. The excavator made quick work of the debris pile. I separated logs that could be milled, brush that could be chipped, and genuine waste. I hauled load after load to the waste facility, keeping every receipt. By Friday afternoon, my property was clean. The debris was gone, properly disposed of or stacked for milling. I'd worked 32 hours, spent $800 in dump fees and another $200 in fuel and incidentals. My total bill, $5,000. I compiled everything into a detailed invoice with photos showing before, during, and after the cleanup. I included copies of all receipts and an hour-by-hour log of the work. Sarah reviewed it and sent it to the HOA with a cover letter demanding payment within 30 days. That weekend, I thought I'd finally have some peace. I was wrong. Saturday morning, I found survey stakes driven into my property all along the back boundary, but they weren't placed at the actual property line. They were placed 15 feet forward onto my land, right where the debris had been. I called Deputy Collins again. Marcus, I can't do much about survey stakes. That's a civil issue unless you can prove who placed them. I know who placed them. The HOA. Can you prove it? I couldn't, but I had an idea. I checked my wildlife cameras. I'd set up several trail cameras around my property for monitoring deer and elk patterns. One of them had a clear view of the back boundary area. I pulled the SD card and reviewed the footage on my laptop. Jackpot. The video showed Tom Peters and another man I didn't recognize coming onto my property Friday evening, just before dark. They were carrying surveying equipment, stakes, and a sledgehammer. The timestamp was clear, 6:47 p.m. The video showed them measuring from the debris pile location and driving in new stakes, then spray painting orange marks on them. I had them. Clear trespassing, clear evidence of them attempting to fraudulently relocate the property boundary. I called Sarah immediately, even though it was Saturday. I have video evidence of the HOA treasurer trespassing and placing fraudulent survey markers on my property. Send it to me now. And Marcus, file another police report. This is beyond civil dispute now. They're attempting to fraudulently alter property boundaries. That could be criminal. I filed the police report online, attached the video, and sent everything to Sarah. By Monday morning, things started moving fast. Sarah filed our lawsuit in district court. The complaint listed illegal dumping, trespass, harassment, fraud regarding property boundaries, attempted extortion, violations of state contractor licensing laws. She requested actual damages, punitive damages, attorney's fees, and a restraining order preventing the HOA from placing any lien on my property or continuing their harassment. The local newspaper got wind of the story somehow. A reporter called me Tuesday morning. "Mr. Lawson, I understand you're in a dispute with your HOA. Would you be willing to comment?" I referred her to Sarah, but the story ran anyway. It was a small piece, but it laid out the basics. HOA dumps debris on homeowner's property, then tries to charge him for cleanup. That article changed everything. By Wednesday, I'd received calls and emails from 7 other homeowners in Timber Ridge. Every single one had a story about Barbara and the HOA board overstepping, charging improper fees, or harassing them over minor violations while ignoring major issues. One homeowner, a retired engineer named Phil, told me he'd been fighting the HOA for 2 years over a retaining wall they'd claimed was his responsibility to repair. He'd proven it was on common area property, but they'd still assessed him $8,000. He'd been paying $200 per month just to avoid foreclosure while fighting it. Another homeowner, a single mother named Rita, had been fined repeatedly for her unkempt yard when her grass was a ½ inch over the arbitrary height limit. She'd racked up $3,000 in fines over 18 months. I started documenting all of their stories. Sarah was interested too. This shows a pattern of abuse. It strengthens our case significantly. The HOA's response to our lawsuit arrived Thursday. Their attorney filed a motion to dismiss, claiming the HOA had broad authority under the CC and Articus, and that I was a vexatious litigant trying to avoid my legitimate responsibilities. They also filed a counterclaim against me for $25,000, claiming I defamed the HOA board members, trespassed on common areas, and caused emotional distress to Barbara Chen. The sheer audacity was breathtaking, but Sarah had anticipated this. "They're trying to scare you. It won't work. We have evidence. They have bluster." The hearing on our emergency motion to prevent the lien was scheduled for the following Monday. In the meantime, winter had decided to remind us we lived in Montana. A massive storm system moved in Friday night. By Saturday morning, we had 14 inches of fresh snow, with another storm predicted for Tuesday. The temperature dropped to -8 degrees. I spent Saturday clearing my driveway with my plow truck and making sure my backup generator was ready. The power in our area could be unreliable during heavy storms. Sunday morning, I woke to discover the power was indeed out. My generator kicked on automatically. I made coffee and watched the snow continue to fall. We were at 20 inches now, and the wind was creating drifts 4 feet high in places. Around noon, I heard engines again. I looked out to see an HOA truck trying to navigate the unplowed road. The development roads were supposed to be plowed by an HOA contractor, but clearly that hadn't happened. The truck got stuck about 100 yards from my driveway. I watched through binoculars as Barbara Chen got out, along with Tom Peters and another woman. They were trying to dig the truck out, but the snow was too deep and they were woefully unprepared. Part of me wanted to leave them there. But it was dangerous weather and they were stuck on a remote road. I'm an outdoorsman, not heartless. I fired up my plow truck and headed out. When I reached them, Barbara's face was red from cold and exertion. Tom was on his phone trying to call for help. Need a pull? I asked through my window. Barbara glared at me. We're fine. You're not fine. You're stuck in a blizzard and it's going to be -15 tonight. Let me pull you out. Tom intervened. Barbara, don't be stupid. Yes, Mr. Lawson, we'd appreciate the help. I hooked a tow strap to their truck and pulled them out easily. Once they were free, I asked, "What are you doing out here in this weather anyway?" "We were trying to inspect storm damage on the common areas," Tom said. "In a blizzard? That's insane." Barbara had apparently found her voice. "The HOA has responsibilities, Mr. Lawson. Some of us take them seriously." I bit back my response. "The road back to the main highway isn't plowed. You should follow me. I'll lead you out." I led their truck back to the main road, which had been plowed by the county. They followed without thanking me and drove off. The storm continued through Sunday night. By Monday morning, we had 32 inches of snow, and several large trees in the development had come down under the weight. Monday was also the hearing date for our emergency motion. I got up at 5, plowed my way to the main road and made the drive into Missoula. The courthouse was open, but half the staff had called in due to the weather. Our hearing was at 9. Sarah met me outside the courtroom. "The HOA's attorney asked for a continuance due to weather," she said. "But the judge denied it. We're going forward." The hearing room was small. Judge Patricia Morrison presided. She was known as a no-nonsense judge who didn't appreciate games. The HOA's attorney, Kenneth Hart, presented his argument first. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of a homeowner refusing to maintain his property in accordance with the CC and Articles. The HOA has both the right and the responsibility to assess fees for violations. Mr. Lawson's lawsuit is frivolous and intended to avoid his legitimate obligations." Judge Morrison looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Hart, have you reviewed the evidence Mr. Lawson's attorney submitted? The photographs showing HOA contractor equipment pushing debris onto his property, the permit violations, the work orders." "Your Honor, the HOA disputes the interpretation of those photographs. The debris naturally accumulated during storm events. Mr. Hart, I've looked at these photos. There are bulldozer tracks. How do you explain bulldozer tracks from natural storm accumulation?" Hart fumbled. The HOA performed legitimate maintenance. Any debris movement was incidental." Sarah stood. "Your Honor, may I, please, Miss Whitaker?" Sarah methodically presented our evidence. The photos, the timeline, the work orders from Summit Land Services with Barbara's signature explicitly directing them to push debris to the property line, the permit violations, the contractor's statement. Then she presented the trespassing evidence. The midnight visit, the fraudulent survey stakes, the The trail camera video showing Tom Peters deliberately placing false boundary markers. Judge Morrison's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. "Your Honor," Sarah concluded, "this isn't a simple HOA dispute. This is a pattern of harassment, fraud, and abuse of authority. The HOA illegally dumped debris on my client's property, then attempted to extort payment from him for cleaning up their own mess. When he refused, they escalated to trespassing, property fraud, and threatened foreclosure. We're asking the court to prevent them from placing any lien on Mr. Lawson's property and to allow our lawsuit to proceed." Judge Morrison turned to Hart. "Counselor, do you have any evidence refuting these photographs and videos?" "Your Honor, the HOA maintains that its actions were within its authority under the CC and Articles." "That's not what I asked. Do you have evidence refuting these photographs showing your client's contractor pushing debris onto Mr. Lawson's property? We dispute the property boundary location." "There are survey stakes in these photographs. Recorded survey stakes. Are you claiming the recorded survey is incorrect?" Hart was sweating now despite the cold. "Your Honor, we need to conduct our own survey." "And is that what was happening when Mr. Peters was caught on camera placing false survey markers 15 feet onto Mr. Lawson's property?" "That was, Your Honor. That was an attempt to clarify the boundary. By moving it 15 feet, Mr. Hart, I'm granting Miss Whitaker's motion. The HOA is enjoined from placing any lien on Mr. Lawson's property pending the outcome of this litigation. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to remove any fraudulent survey markers they've placed. And I'm going to refer this matter to the county attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. What I'm seeing here goes beyond a civil dispute." The gavel came down. We'd won the first round. Outside the courthouse, Sarah was elated. "That went better than I expected. Judge Morrison doesn't suffer fools, and Hart looked foolish in there. What happens now? Now we proceed with the full lawsuit, discovery, depositions, and eventually trial. But Marcus, after that hearing, I think they'll want to settle. This is bad for them and getting worse." I wasn't so sure. Barbara Chen didn't strike me as someone who admitted defeat easily. I was right. Tuesday brought another massive storm, this one dumping 18 more inches of snow. My weather station recorded -12 degrees. The wind was brutal, creating whiteout conditions. I was inside, warm by my wood stove, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Lawson, this is Rita Martinez. We spoke last week about my HOA problems." "Hi, Rita, what's going on?" "The HOA just sent out an emergency special assessment. They're charging every homeowner $2,500 for storm cleanup and emergency road plowing. They say it's due immediately because of the extreme weather. They can't do that. Emergency assessments have to be voted on by the membership." "That's what I thought, but the letter says the board has emergency authority during natural disasters. Mr. Lawson, I can't afford this. I'm barely making my regular assessments. Send me a copy of the letter. And Rita, call Sarah Whitaker. She's my attorney, and I think she's going to be interested in this." Rita sent the letter. It was 2 pages of legal jargon, but the essence was clear. The HOA was assessing every homeowner $2,500, due within 10 days, for emergency storm-related services and common area protection. The timing was suspicious. Right after we'd won in court, they were suddenly hitting everyone with emergency fees. I called Sarah. "They're trying to generate cash," she said immediately, "probably to pay their legal bills, but they're overstepping again. Let me review the CC and Articles, but I'm almost certain they need a membership vote for this." By that evening, I'd heard from 12 different homeowners, all furious about the assessment. Phil, the retired engineer, organized an emergency homeowner meeting for Wednesday evening at the community center. The community center was one of the few HOA amenities worth having. It was a nice building with a meeting hall, and it was supposed to be available to all homeowners. We'd see if Barbara tried to block us. Wednesday morning, I got another surprise. A sheriff's deputy I didn't know arrived at my door with a summons. The HOA was seeking a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing Barbara Chen and disrupting HOA operations. I called Sarah immediately. "They're desperate," she said. "This is absurd." "We'll fight it, but Marcus, you need to be at that homeowner meeting tonight. Something tells me things are about to get very interesting." The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. By 6:30, the parking lot at the community center was full. I counted at least 40 cars, and there were only 63 homes in the development. Phil met me at the door. "Marcus, I think every homeowner who actually lives here is coming. The only ones who aren't are the 3 board members and a couple of their friends." Inside, the meeting hall was packed. I recognized most faces, though I'd never spoken to many of them. Rita was there with her 2 kids. I saw John and Elizabeth Patterson, an elderly couple from the far end of the development. There were young families, retirees, and everyone in between. Phil called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. "Thank you all for coming. I think we all know why we're here. The HOA board has been overstepping their authority, and this latest emergency assessment is the final straw." He laid out the situation clearly. The illegal dumping on my property, the fraudulent fees, the harassment, and now the questionable emergency assessment. Then Rita stood. "It's not just this assessment. I've been documenting HOA expenses for the past year. Our dues are $350 per month. With 63 homes, that's $22,050 per month, or $264,600 per year. But our actual expenses, road plowing, basic maintenance, utilities for this building, that should only be about $100,000 per year. Where's the rest of the money going?" The room erupted in concerned murmurs. John Patterson raised his hand. "I was on the board 5 years ago before Barbara took over. We had healthy reserves, about $200,000 in the bank. We kept dues low and only assessed for major repairs when needed. Does anyone know what our current reserve balance is?" No one did. Phil spoke up. "I requested the HOA financial records last month under the Montana HOA statute that requires transparency. Barbara refused. She said the records were available for review at her home, by appointment only, during business hours on weekdays." "That's illegal," someone shouted. "They have to make them available." "I know," Phil said. "That's why I filed a formal complaint with the state, but it takes time to process." I stood. "I think we need to call an emergency membership meeting and vote to remove the board. We have the right to do that under the bylaws." Sarah, who'd slipped in quietly, stood. "I'm Sarah Whitaker, Marcus's attorney. He's correct. Under your bylaws, 20% of homeowners can call a special meeting and a simple majority can remove board members. You have way more than 20% here." Phil started circulating a petition. Within 15 minutes, we had signatures from 38 homeowners, more than half the development. "This petition calls for a special membership meeting 1 week from today, next Wednesday," Phil announced. "The agenda will be to vote on removing the current board members and electing interim replacements. According to the bylaws, we have to provide 7 days' notice to all members." We were finalizing the details when the door burst open. Barbara Chen strode in, followed by Tom Peters and the 3rd board member, a woman named Denise Fletcher. "This meeting is not authorized," Barbara announced loudly. "You're using HOA facilities without board approval." Phil stood calmly. Barbara, every homeowner has the right to use the community center. It's in the CC and Articus that you're so fond of citing, not for meetings that undermine the board's authority. We're exercising our rights as homeowners. We've called a special membership meeting for next Wednesday to vote on board removal. Barbara's face flushed red. You can't remove the board. We were elected for 3-year terms. Sarah stepped forward. Actually, Miss Chen, the bylaws clearly state that board members can be removed at any time by a majority vote of the membership. It's Section 8.2. I assume you've read your own bylaws. This is a coup, Tom Peters said. You're all upset about one entitled homeowner who won't follow the rules. He pointed at me. Rita stood up, her voice shaking but firm. This isn't about Marcus. This is about charging me $3,000 in fines for grass height. This is about refusing to show us financial records. This is about you assessing emergency fees right after you lost in court. The emergency assessment is legal, Barbara insisted. Then show us the financials that justify it, John Patterson said. Show us where the money's going. We don't owe you an accounting at every moment. The annual meeting is in April. Montana law requires you to make financial records available within 10 days of a member request, Sarah said. Multiple members have requested them. You're in violation. Barbara glared at her. Who are you to come to our community and cause trouble? I'm an attorney representing a homeowner whose rights you've violated. And if you continue to refuse to provide financial records, I'll be filing additional complaints with the state. The meeting went on for another hour. By the end, we'd formed a committee to organize the special membership meeting, drafted the notice that would go to all homeowners, and established a communication plan. Barbara and her board members left after trying several more times to shut down the meeting. Each time, we calmly cited the relevant bylaws and continued. As people filed out, many stopped to thank me or share their own HOA horror stories. The sense of community was stronger than I'd ever felt in Timber Ridge, but I knew Barbara wouldn't go quietly. Thursday morning proved me right. I woke to find my driveway blocked. Someone had pushed snow across the entrance, creating a berm 4 feet high and 15 feet wide. My plow truck could handle it, but it was obviously intentional. I checked my trail cameras. The footage showed an HOA truck with a plow blade deliberately pushing snow across my driveway at 3 in the morning. I documented it, filed another police report, and sent the video to Sarah. They're spiraling, she said. This is harassment. I'm adding it to our lawsuit. I plowed out my driveway and went about my day. I had a client meeting, a couple looking to book a spring fishing trip, and I wanted to maintain some normalcy. That afternoon, Deputy Collins called me. Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up. The county attorney's office is opening an investigation into the HOA. Judge Morrison's referral, plus all these police reports, they're taking it seriously. They're looking at fraud, trespassing, harassment, and possibly embezzlement if the financial irregularities pan out. How long will that take? Could be a while. They're going to need to subpoena records, interview people, but I thought you'd want to know it's moving forward. That was good news, at least. Friday brought the HOA's response to our special meeting notice. A letter to all homeowners claiming the meeting was illegitimate, that the petition was fraudulent, and that any votes taken would be invalid. It threatened legal action against anyone who participated in this illegal attempt to usurp lawful HOA governance. Sarah laughed when I showed her. They're bluffing. They have no legal basis for this. The meeting is entirely proper under your bylaws. But the letter rattled some homeowners. I got calls from 3 people who were now afraid to attend the meeting or vote. They're trying to intimidate you, I told each of them. That's all this is. Sarah says the meeting is legal and she's right. The weekend was relatively quiet. I caught up on work, organized my photography equipment, and tried to relax. The next week would be intense. Monday brought another storm, this one dropping 8 inches of heavy, wet snow. I spent the morning plowing and clearing my roof. Around noon, I heard a loud crack from the direction of the common area. I walked back to investigate. A large pine tree had come down, likely from the weight of the wet snow. But it hadn't fallen onto the common area. It had fallen directly onto the boundary area where the HOA had dumped the debris I'd cleaned up. The tree was massive, probably 80 feet tall, and when it fell, it had destroyed a section of the fence that technically belonged to the HOA, since it marked the common area boundary. I took photos and videos, documenting the damage. Then I waited. By Tuesday afternoon, I received a letter from the HOA. They were assessing me $3,500 for the tree removal and fence repair, claiming the tree had fallen from my property. I reviewed my photos carefully. The tree had definitely been rooted in the common area, not my property. The stump was clearly visible in my pictures, 10 feet onto the HOA side of the boundary. I sent the photos to Sarah with a note. "They're trying again." She responded immediately. "This is getting ridiculous." "Don't worry, we'll handle it." Wednesday arrived, the day of the special membership meeting. I got to the community center an hour early to help Phil set up. We'd arranged chairs for all 63 homeowners, prepared sign and sheets, and printed copies of the bylaws and the meeting agenda. Sarah arrived at 6:30. "I'm here as an observer and to answer any legal questions, but this is your meeting, your community. You all need to take ownership of it." By 7, we had 47 homeowners present, either in person or by proxy. That was more than enough for a quorum. Phil called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight to vote on removing the current board members and electing interim replacements. But first, I want to address the letter the board sent trying to intimidate us. Sarah, can you explain why this meeting is legal?" Sarah stood and clearly outlined the legal basis for the meeting, citing the specific bylaw sections. "This meeting is entirely proper. Any votes taken tonight are valid and binding. The current board's letter was an attempt to suppress your legal rights as homeowners." Then we moved to reports. Rita presented her financial analysis, showing the huge gap between dues collected and documented expenses. Based on publicly available records and the information the board has provided, there's approximately $150,000 per year unaccounted for. Over the 5 years Barbara's been board president, that's $750,000. Our reserve account should have well over $500,000 in it. But when John Patterson last checked, 3 years ago, it had only $87,000. The room erupted in shocked conversation. Phil called for order. "We need to vote on the board removal. All in favor of removing Barbara Chen as president and board member." 45 hands went up. 2 abstained. "All in favor of removing Tom Peters as treasurer and board member." 46 hands. "All in favor of removing Denise Fletcher as secretary and board member." 47 hands. The board was out. We then voted on interim replacements. Phil was elected president, Rita became treasurer, and Elizabeth Patterson accepted the secretary position. Their first task would be to obtain all HOA records and accounts, conduct a full audit, and report back to the membership. As the meeting wrapped up, I felt a weight lift. We'd taken back control of our community, but Barbara Chen wasn't there. Neither were Tom or Denise. I had a bad feeling about that. My suspicions were confirmed when I got home and found another notice on my door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from Barbara Chen personally, informing me she was suing me for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $100,000 in damages. I called Sarah, even though it was late. "Let her sue," Sarah said. "It's a SLAPP suit trying to silence you. Montana has anti-SLAPP laws. We'll get it dismissed and she'll end up paying your attorney fees." Thursday morning, Phil called an emergency meeting of the new board. We met at the community center at 9. "We have a problem," Phil said. "I went to the bank this morning to get access to the HOA accounts. Barbara removed herself as a signatory yesterday afternoon before the vote. The account now has no authorized signers. The bank won't let us access it without a court order." "How much is in it?" Rita asked. "The balance showing is $14,227. We all stared. "The account should have had hundreds of thousands. Where's the reserve account?" I asked. "That's the thing," Phil said. "There's only one account. The operating and reserve funds should be separate, but they're not. And the bank says this is the only HOA account they have." Rita pulled out her laptop. "I've been going through the records Barbara finally handed over last night. They're incomplete, but from what I can see, there are payments to several companies I don't recognize. Here, look at this. Mountain Vista Property Management, $8,500 per month." "Who are they?" Elizabeth asked. I looked them up. The company was registered 3 years ago. "The registered agent is Barbara Chen." The room went silent. "She's been paying her own company with HOA funds," Phil said. "It looks that way. And there's more. Summit Peak Consulting, $3,000 per month. Registered agent, Tom Peters. Cascade Administrative Services, $2,500 per month. Registered agent, Denise Fletcher." They'd been funneling HOA money to shell companies they controlled for years. "This is embezzlement," I said. Phil nodded grimly. "We need to go to the police. Now." We spent the rest of Thursday compiling evidence. Rita worked through the financial records, highlighting the suspicious payments. I organized all my documentation of the illegal dumping, the trespassing, the fraudulent boundary markers. By Friday afternoon, we had a comprehensive package. Phil, Rita, and I went to the sheriff's office together. Detective Rachel Morrison, no relation to the judge, met with us. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, and took detailed notes as we explained everything. "So let me make sure I understand," she said after an hour. "The HOA board has allegedly embezzled over $700,000 over 5 years, attempted to fraudulently charge homeowners for expenses the HOA caused, trespassed multiple times, placed fraudulent survey markers, and is now trying to hide assets." "That's correct," Phil said. "And you have documentation for all of this." Rita handed over a thick folder. "Financial records, photos, videos, work orders, emails, everything." Detective Morrison reviewed the documents for several minutes. Then she looked up. "This is substantial. I'm going to need to bring in white-collar crime specialists. But based on what I'm seeing, there's probable cause for criminal investigation. Don't expect this to move fast, but we'll be thorough." We left the sheriff's office feeling like we'd finally taken the right step. But there was still the matter of recovering the HOA funds and fixing the mess Barbara had created. That evening, Sarah called with news. "The county attorney is expediting the investigation based on the embezzlement evidence. They're going to seek a court order to freeze any accounts connected to Barbara, Tom, and Denise, and those shell companies. How long will that take? If they move fast, maybe a week. In the meantime, Phil needs to establish new HOA accounts and work with the bank to transfer whatever funds are recoverable." The weekend was a blur of activity. Phil worked with an attorney to get court orders for account access. Rita continued analyzing financial records. I helped coordinate communication with the other homeowners, keeping everyone updated. Monday brought the first major break. The court granted an emergency order freezing all accounts associated with Barbara's shell company. The balance was $387,000. By Tuesday, they'd frozen Tom's company account too, $198,000. Denise's account had $156,000. Combined with the $14,000 in the HOA account, we'd located $755,000. Not all of it was necessarily HOA money. They'd argue some was legitimate business income, but it was a start. Wednesday, Detective Morrison called Phil. "We're executing search warrants this morning. Barbara Chen's home, Tom Peters' home, and Denise Fletcher's home, plus their business locations. I wanted to give you a heads up in case there's any commotion in the neighborhood." I happened to be at Phil's house when the call came. We drove over toward Barbara Street, keeping a respectful distance. 3 sheriff's vehicles were parked outside Barbara's large house. Deputies were carrying out boxes of documents. Barbara stood on her porch, screaming at them about warrants and illegal searches. "You can't do this," she shouted. "I'm a respected member of this community. You're harassing me because of that man." She pointed in a random direction, but I had no doubt she meant me. A deputy calmly showed her the warrant paperwork. She snatched it and continued yelling. Similar scenes played out at Tom's and Denise's homes. By afternoon, the sheriff's office had seized dozens of boxes of financial records, computers, and other evidence. Thursday morning, the arrest warrants were issued. Barbara Chen was arrested at her home at 7 a.m., charged with embezzlement, fraud, theft, and criminal mischief. Tom Peters was arrested at his workplace. Same charges, plus an additional charge of property fraud for the fake survey markers. Denise Fletcher turned herself in at the sheriff's office after her attorney called her. All 3 were arraigned Thursday afternoon. Bail was set at $50,000 each. Barbara and Tom posted bail immediately. Denise couldn't and spent the night in jail. The local newspaper ran the story Friday morning. Former HOA board arrested in embezzlement scheme. It detailed the allegations, the amounts involved, and the investigation that led to the arrests. My phone rang all day with calls from homeowners, reporters, and even people from other HOA communities sharing their own horror stories. Sarah called Friday afternoon with more good news. "Judge Morrison dismissed Barbara's lawsuit against you. She ruled it was a slap suit intended to silence you, and she's ordered Barbara to pay your attorney fees. It's not much, maybe $3,000, but it's the principle." Things moved quickly after that. The county attorney's office took over prosecution of the criminal case. Discovery revealed even more wrongdoing. Falsified invoices, kickbacks from contractors, and evidence that Barbara had actually ordered the debris dumped on my property specifically to create a pretext for charging me fees as retaliation for my questioning her authority at a previous meeting. The civil lawsuit Sarah and I had filed proceeded in parallel. With the criminal evidence available, the HOA's insurance company quickly settled. They paid $45,000 to cover my cleanup costs, legal fees, and damages for harassment and emotional distress. But the biggest victory was the return of the embezzled funds. After lengthy legal proceedings, the court ordered that all funds in the shell company accounts be returned to the HOA, minus any amounts the defendants could prove were legitimate business income. Barbara couldn't prove any legitimate income. Her company supposedly provided property management consulting, but there were no contracts, no work product, no evidence of any actual services. The entire $387,000 was returned to the HOA. Tom and Denise had slightly better documentation, but most of their money came back too. In total, the HOA recovered $698,000. The criminal trial was scheduled for the following September, but none of the defendants wanted to risk trial. In June, they accepted plea deals. Barbara Chen pleaded guilty to felony embezzlement and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with 2 years suspended. She'd served 2 years, followed by probation, and was ordered to pay an additional $100,000 in restitution. Tom Peters pleaded guilty to embezzlement and received 18 months, with credit for time served. Denise Fletcher, who'd cooperated more fully and had taken less money, received probation and community service. All 3 were permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in Montana. Through all of this, life in Timber Ridge slowly returned to normal. Phil's interim board did an excellent job. They hired a professional management company, a legitimate one, to handle the day-to-day operations, reduced the monthly dues to $175 after the recovered funds rebuilt the reserves, and implemented strict transparency measures. Regular financial reports were published monthly. All board meetings were open to homeowners. Any expense over $500 required membership approval. In the April elections, Phil was elected to a full term as president. Rita became treasurer, and several other community-minded homeowners joined the board. As for me, I finally got some peace. My property remained pristine. I continued my hunting guide business, my photography work, and my quiet life in the Montana wilderness. The debris pile location, where all this started, became something of a community joke. I planted native wildflowers there, and each spring they bloom in a riot of colors. The excavator I'd borrowed from Mike sat idle in my shed for a few weeks after the cleanup before he picked it up. He never charged me for its use. "Watching you take down a corrupt HOA board was payment enough," he said with a grin on a warm May evening. After everything had settled, I sat on my porch with a beer and watched the sun set over the mountains. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Final restitution payment came through today. Your account has been credited. Congratulations on seeing it through to the end." I smiled. The money was nice, sure, but the real victory was knowing that Barbara and her cronies would never abuse another homeowner. The real victory was a community that had found its voice and taken back control. A deer wandered into my yard, pausing to look at me before continuing into the forest. An eagle circled overhead. The evening air smelled of pine and wildflowers. This was why I'd moved to Montana. Not for HOA meetings and legal battles, but for this. For the quiet. For the wilderness. For the sense of being part of something bigger than human petness and greed. My phone buzzed again. Phil this time. Board meeting tomorrow night to discuss the summer activity schedule. We're thinking of organizing a community campout in the common area. Interested in leading some nature walks? I typed back. Absolutely. That's what an HOA should be. People coming together to build community, not tyrants extracting money and wielding petty power. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I finished my beer and headed inside, already planning the nature walk routes I'd lead that summer. Behind me, where the debris pile had once sat, the wildflowers swayed gently in the evening breeze. A fitting memorial to the day I'd stood up to corruption, and one, not just for myself, but for an entire community. The excavator work had been the least of what I'd done. The real work had been refusing to back down, documenting everything, and bringing together homeowners who'd felt powerless individually but were unstoppable together in the end. That's what defeated Barbara Chen. Not lawyers or judges or police. though they all played their parts. What defeated her was a community that decided enough was enough. I slept well that night and every night after. The HOA wars of Timber Ridge were over, and we'd won not through escalation or revenge, but through persistence, evidence, and the simple refusal to let bullies win. And whenever I saw that patch of wildflowers blooming each spring, I'd remember that sometimes the best response to someone dumping their mess on you is to clean it up, document every step, and make sure they pay for what they've done, legally and properly. Justice doesn't always move fast, but when it moves, it's worth the wait.